Gladys Berejiklian says there are glimmers of hope as COVID cases in some hotspots are stabilising. But infections are now rising in other areas, specifically densely populated parts of the inner city. Work continues, though, on planning for life after the outbreak. And the Premier is under growing pressure to make sure that people in hotspots get the same freedoms as everyone else. Here's State political reporter Ashley Raper.
He has all the tools of the trade, but Joe the barber wasn't equipped for the devastating blow of this lockdown.
I don't know how to pay the rent anymore. I like all my customers and I feel very, very lonely.
The 74-year-old's Padstow shop is in the council area with the most cases. So there's no guarantee he'll be able to reopen when the state hits the 70% double-dose vaccination target.
I'm closed now for over 2 months and I don't know how this goes.
I really do hope that our city and our community gets treated the same as everyone else when things start to open up.
Pressure is increasing on the Premier to ensure uniformity of freedoms as the plan for emerging from lockdown is finalised.
Make sure that when restrictions are lifted, they're lifted across the board for everybody.
I'm extremely optimistic that at 70% double dose, everybody who is vaccinated will enjoy life much more freely than what we do today, and that's a commitment we've made from day one.
Outside of the hotspots, increasing cases are causing a concern in Marrickville, Glebe, Waterloo and Redfern.
Sydney Local Health District has set up some special clinics, Pfizer clinics, where bookings can be made or walk-in appointments can be made for residents of those areas.
There have been 9 more deaths, including an Indigenous man in his 60s from Dubbo who died in a Sydney hospital, while cases remain high.
There are glimmers of hope that some areas are seeing a stabilisation.
75% of adults in the state have now had at least 1 dose of the vaccine. 42% are fully vaccinated, so the final call has been made to move the NRL Grand Final to Brisbane. As the state looks to reopening sometime next month, there's still no clarity as to how the number of cases will influence the freedoms given. What continues to be clear, though, is the Premier's determination to push ahead when vaccination targets are met.
Once we hit 80% double dose, we will definitely be opening up Sydney Airport to welcome home Australians.
At that point too, there's likely to be a shift to home quarantine. There's a trial underway in South Australia, which includes using facial recognition to check people are at home.
It might come down to, if you're prepared to give up a little bit of privacy, you can then quarantine at home.
Yet another potential sacrifice during the pandemic. Ashley Raper, ABC News, Sydney.
Ashley, Crisis Cabinet met tonight and you've got some breaking news about the regional lockdown.
Yes, Juanita, Crisis Cabinet had to decide whether to extend the regional lockdown beyond Friday. Now, parts will remain locked down, but the mid-north coast, the north coast, the Riverina and Murrumbidgee areas will be released. Those areas will still be subject to strict rules, and if cases pop up, there'll be snap lockdowns, but this will undoubtedly be welcome news for people living in those areas. Another issue on the agenda was finalising the roadmap, and that's the government's plan for easing restrictions for fully vaccinated people when the state hits that 70% double dose vaccine target. The ABC understands that regional travel will be allowed as part of that plan. Also in the roadmap will be which businesses can reopen and how they'll be allowed to operate, as well as the rules for places of worships, weddings, sporting events. So, Juanita, all that detail will be unveiled by the Premier tomorrow.
Ashley Raper reporting there. We know that children catch COVID, but the latest New South Wales health research shows most of them don't get sick, and it's rare for kids to end up in hospital. But teachers say a study raises serious concerns about transmission of the virus in schools.
Silent hallways, empty fields, abandoned classrooms. This is what many schools in the state look like right now. But despite so few students each day, a new report has found throughout the education system the Delta variant is 5 times more infectious than the original strain last year.
Well, I think the report deepens everyone's concerns.
The good news is COVID generally causes only mild symptoms, if any, in children.
Only around 2% will require hospitalisation, and for many of those 2%, it's actually for monitoring and social care.
Despite most children not having a major effect from COVID, it's still very important that we do everything we can do to protect them.
The report found there were 51 schools and childcare centres where children and staff were infected. But this research was conducted at the start of the outbreak and during school holidays. And just 3 weeks after the study, the number of educational hotspots nearly doubled.
We're worried what the transmission rate might be when there are a larger number of students on site.
Most COVID cases are in childcare, which has stayed open for children of essential workers. And it's the adults who are most likely to pass on the virus.
What we saw was that the highest rate of spread was actually amongst unvaccinated adult staff.
This is one of the latest schools that COVID's forced shut. The Teachers' Union says the constant closures aren't tenable. It's demanding the government prioritise vaccinations for students and staff.
What it clearly highlights is that the national rollout of vaccinations for young people, 12 to 15, has to be accelerated.
A race against the clock as the staggered return to school starts on October 25. Cayman Gok, ABC News, Sydney.
There's been a spike in new COVID infections in the Illawarra Shoalhaven. Wollongong had 24 of the 34 new cases in the region. Western New South Wales recorded another 27 infections, and the neighbouring Far West region had 7, all in Wilcannia. There were 15 on the Central Coast and 11 in Hunter, New England. Bourke is one town where entire families have been affected by COVID. Local Aboriginal elders say getting the right message out to the community has been a major challenge. Lucy Thackeray reports.
Nyemba woman Catherine Cubby tested positive to COVID 3 weeks ago in Bourke.
The emotional toll is draining.
Now more than 40 of her family members have been infected, from her 2-year-old granddaughter to her 72-year-old mother.
You just think about trying to be there when you're going to reunite with all your family again. It's very emotional.
Local elders say vital health messaging has been missing in Western and Far Western New South Wales, meaning many Aboriginal people remain unvaccinated.
Communication, I think that's the critical part right there. If we don't get that right, and we haven't got it right, we get the chaos that we have.
In nearby Brewarrina, local cafe owner Trish Frail has been feeding families in isolation by donating meals made with native ingredients. Here, vaccination rates are higher thanks to a locally led health campaign.
We were designing flyers that were relative just to breathe, so people could relate to them.
Local Indigenous leaders want to play a greater role to keep their towns safe. They say because they're connected to community, they can work with authorities to share important information with other residents.
We'd actually thought this thing was gone. It was gone. And I know there's a lot of finger pointing and blaming going on at the moment, but as a community, we've got to take responsibility.
The pandemic has created other challenges.
We've seen a lot of emotional trauma develop from the lockdown situation.
It's important to keep our mob safe because, I've got a lot of people in my family that got chronic illnesses.
In this part of the world, cultural ties run deep, and community care is ensuring no one slips through the cracks. Lucy Thackeray, ABC News, Brewarrina.